The self-sufficient Nepali culture is family-centered, leading to a common thought of discouragement to community members immigrating to different countries. In the past, more people came to Nepal than Nepali people went away from their home. However, an exceptional Nepali architect, or Nico, from ancient Nepal is believed to have been invited by China, Tibet, and Bhutan for his talent to build their cities. It is the first known historic story of a Nepali immigrant going to a foreign land. Today, Nepali people have gone all around the world for various reasons, including the United States of America. It is my pleasure to welcome Emma from IINE to discuss some of the topics around immigration, including of Nepali-speaking people here in New England. Please enjoy the conversation. Thank you. Hi Emma, you're welcome to Culture Nepal. Thank you for taking your time. I would like to begin with my sincere gratitude to IINA family members and you, and especially Bethany Gamble and Kate Bertino, who helped me to get my citizenship.
Thank you so much for having me on your program today, and all of us at the International Institute of New England are really happy that you chose to come to us for your citizenship services.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I wanted to volunteer for the organization without really realizing that at one point I'll be needing that service. So it was very pleasant surprise for me. So let's talk about this really important and big subject of immigrations and refugee work that you do, all the humanitarian you provide in New England area. So let's begin with a brief history of IINE. And I know it's been 100 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And your work with them.
So the International Institute of New England we are a 102-year-old organization, almost 103 years old. So it was founded in 1918 in Lowell, Massachusetts, and it was born out of the YWCA. So a group of women who are part of the YWCA kind of founded this group that was meant to support immigrants coming into the community because they saw that they had needs in learning language and getting jobs and accessing education. And so they formed this organization. And in the beginning, it was a lot of kind of cultural groups. So people from the same home country would come together and sing their traditional songs or cook their traditional food or speak their language with each other. And then over the years, it really grew into a more formal human services organization. In the 1920s, a very similar group, the International Institute of Boston, was founded, and then another organization which was founded in the 1980s in Manchester all came together into one organization as the International Institute of New England in the last couple of decades. So now we're one nonprofit organization with one president operating in 3 cities. Wow. And so what kind of work do you do with them? Your specifics of your area of work? Well, our work is actually quite broad in some ways. So our mission is to support refugees and immigrants to achieve their goals and their dreams through resettlement, career services, education, and pathways to citizenship. But we do many things under that mission. And so we operate the refugee resettlement program. So we're one of the national partners involved in the federal refugee admissions program. And that's a big piece of what we do. We also provide case management for newly arrived refugees and immigrants throughout their first several years in the United States. We have comprehensive career services, which includes preparation for jobs in the United States, resume preparation, interview practice, job search, all of the pieces that it would take to help somebody be ready to get a job for the first time in this country. We provide English language classes for people at lots of different levels. We provide skills training programs to help people who are pursuing careers in specific pathways, so hospitality, healthcare. We've branched out into construction and sort of building maintenance. We have youth mentoring programs. So it's really kind of a full continuum of services that hopefully will really help someone to kind of relaunch their life in the United States. Yeah. And then, of course, we have our legal immigration services program, which you accessed, which helps people with a whole wide range of immigration concerns.
So with your experience, why do you think immigrants are important for America?
I mean, I don't think America would be America without immigrants. I think immigrants are at the center of this country. I think they are the heart of this country. I think they are this country, or at least there's a huge part of it. And that is true on so many levels. It is true in terms of, culture and the cultural richness of the United States and the diversity of Americans in terms of food and language and religion. It is true in terms of sort of innovation and all of the ideas that are brought into the country from people who've come from other places. It's true in terms of our economy, especially in New England, where people are getting older and having fewer children. We would have no population growth without immigrants, and therefore we would have no workforce. So I don't do my work for that reason, but I think if you're looking at it from a purely economic standpoint, immigrants are essential to this region. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what more I could say about it. This country would not be this country without the incredible contributions of immigrants.
That's a very heartwarming statement you've made. As an immigrant myself, I came here to give and, share my values. Yeah. And then hearing that from you is very, very nice. That, I always want to be useful to the community, So thank you so much for that, insight. So talking about that cultural differences, how do you manage the cultural competency while you're working with so many different nationalities? What are your challenges to work with them?
Yeah,
must be very hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. On the one hand, it is hard. On the other hand, it's sort of one of the best parts of our work because we get to work with people from all over the world, and that includes our staff, our interns, our clients. I mean, we're a pretty diverse organization. A lot of the folks who intern at our offices and then who go on to work for our offices were former clients or have come through similar experiences as many of our clients who were immigrants or refugees to this country themselves. And so one of the ways that we really try to be adaptive and culturally responsive is by having many people from many different cultures on our staff so that we speak many languages, we're able to navigate in complex situations, and we're really kind of, as best we can, reflecting the communities we serve. But of course, it also requires training. People have to learn about the new groups coming in. They have to learn what different things may mean. We have to work very, very closely with our interpreters. So many of our staff speak multiple languages, but nobody speaks every language they need. So we work very hard to recruit and retain high quality interpreters from the communities that we serve. And it's an ongoing process. And I think, with refugees especially, they tend to come in a several year wave. So maybe you're resettling people from Somalia for 5 years, and you're resettling people from Bhutan for 5 years, and so, during a period of time, you might get to know a community pretty well, because at that point, maybe you've welcomed 40 or 50 families already from that country or from that culture. And so over time, you really start to develop more of a competency in working with that group of people.
Right. And talking about refugees, even there is a different nationalities and culture in one hand, but also within that, even the immigration population is not, one way of immigrants, some are refugees, some are diversity visa, some are students, and, all sort of thing. So the navigating them must be so, so different,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So, and then talking about this type of immigrants, how do you, how does this, for example, refugees issue starts for you, for this organization particularly?
So that's a great question, and it's one that people often ask. So the International Institute of New England only operates domestically. All of our work is in the United States. So we are an affiliate, like a partner of an organization called the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. They're based right outside of Washington, D.C. And so they are the organization that contracts with the federal government to resettle refugees, and they essentially subcontract to us, as well as to a wide network of other similar organizations. And so the way that it works is organizations like us receive something called an assurance request. So we're sent basically some biographical data, some medical data about a person or a family, and we have the opportunity to review that and determine, yes, we can resettle this case, or no, we can't. And the kinds of reasons that we may say no are, it's a very large family and we know we don't have housing available for a family that large, or there's a very complex medical case and we know the care for that situation doesn't exist where we're operating. But in almost all cases, we say, yes, we're going to resettle this family. And so we assure the case. At that point, we wait for something called a travel notification. And when it arrives, it'll say, this refugee family is arriving on this flight on this day, pick them up at the airport. And we do. And so oftentimes that travel notification is for only a week or 2 weeks in the future. And you have that amount of time to find an apartment, to furnish it, to get everything ready for this family to arrive. And then we need to be there at the airport ready to pick them up when they're landing. And so for many refugees in New England, International Institute staff members are the first people they meet. Wow. When they arrive here, and they don't know what we look like and we don't know what they look like, but they have this paperwork that has a certain appearance, and they usually have it on, like, around their neck on a string. And so we look for people with that paperwork and they look for us, and then we just wave to each other, and that's how their lives start in the United States.
So you will be the first family for them in a way.
In a way, and we do have a lot of people. I mean, I've heard former clients say, one woman who was a client who ended up interpreting on staff for us later on said, the International Institute was like my mother in Massachusetts in the beginning. Like, this was, it wrapped its arms around me, and that's what I had in the beginning. So I don't know if everyone feels that way, but I'm glad that she did.
Absolutely. Wow. So, in other hand, there's immigrants coming to this new home, new place, and find a mother like you. But also, you probably had a challenge to work with a welcoming community here, who are sometimes insecure about immigrations, sometimes welcoming. Yeah. How do you manage that? How do you get the support from the welcoming community? How do you work with them?
That is such a great question. And the answer is we work with them in so many different ways. There are people in the communities where we work who are so excited to welcome immigrants and refugees to their communities, and they help by donating furniture when we're setting up apartments, helping to come and physically move furniture and set up the apartments, they host like something we call welcome dinners, where a church or a temple or a mosque will put together a beautiful meal, and we'll bring our clients, and they'll share a meal together and get to know each other. They volunteer in our programs. They do so many things. Of course, there are people who are insecure and they wonder, are immigrants or refugees coming here to take our jobs, or what does this mean? Every now and then we have people reach out and sort of ask critical questions, or want to sort of poke at the work we're doing and try to pick it apart. But quite honestly, we're really lucky to work in pretty open-minded communities that are very diverse already. And so people understand that, their families may have been immigrants or refugees one or two or three generations ago. And so for the most part, we benefit from some open-minded host communities, I would say.
So you don't have any difficulties, especially in this part of the...
I can't say that we don't have any difficulties. I mean, we have faced difficulties. And I think under the last federal administration, there was at one point a policy put into place where it's challenging to describe, but refugee resettlement is a federal program, and local jurisdictions don't actually have any authority to say, yes, refugees can come here, or no, they can't. Refugees enter the country at the will of the federal government, and they can go anywhere. At one point, the Trump administration tried to put in place policy where local cities or states had to give their approval for refugees to arrive. And that was challenging because we had to go in front of, the local governments of the communities where we work and basically make a case for refugee resettlement. And it was very tense. We didn't know what was going to happen. It wasn't like a sure bet that all of these, city councilors would say, yes, yes, we want the program to continue. In the end, that is what happened. We got approval in all of the places where we work, but
Yeah.
it was challenging, and it certainly brought out a lot of questions about, do we have the capacity to absorb these people? What about the schools? People are struggling already. What about housing? It's expensive already. What about all the low income people or homeless people who are already here? Why are we bringing in more people to rely on our systems? And so those were some challenging conversations. I really do hope it resulted in some people better understanding the contributions of refugees and immigrants, and again, why they're so critical for our communities, but it wasn't easy.
Right. So while those questions are valid to me, just like immigrants has a challenges, I'm sure people here also want to be secure and want to have a job, want to have a home. And I as much as I agree with that, can you also tell us in your experience, why is it important to address these immigrants issues in America besides the issues of non-immigrant? How can we work it together to help each other out rather than feel that we're against each other?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have a good answer to that question, but I know that when it's working, what it leads to is a much stronger community and a much stronger country. If I look at, I don't know, examples of community colleges that the International Institute works with, and you've got students born in the United States studying alongside students who came from other countries, with faculty and staff born in the United States and faculty and staff born in other countries. Everybody's collaborating, everybody's learning from each other. That's an incredible accomplishment in my mind, and it's also a better outcome for that college than if somehow immigrants and refugees were excluded. And the same is true for businesses, right? I look at some of our business partnerships and the employers who hire our clients, and I see, ones who have really reached out and made the effort to bring immigrants into their workforce, and how much better off they are for that reason. So I don't know how to get that message to people if they don't see it already. There's actually some research that shows if a person is questioning immigration and they're a little unsure, you may be able to sway them. If they're very opposed to immigration, there's not much you can do. They've made up their minds. They're kind of already decided. But I do know that when it's working, yeah, it's unstoppable. There's nothing we could do that would be better in this country.
Yes, and then let's face the fact that America is not like poor country. It
Right.
has enough resources to share. It just, I think, psychological insecurity that we end up, in a personal level, that we are not secure. So if immigrants can address that, to reach out to those people who are insecure and make them feel comfortable, I think maybe that can be one. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that happen. I think there's also a misconception that a lot of people come to the US to somehow benefit from its incredible public benefits, and that's just very much not my experience. I mean, people come here and work so hard. So many of the people who enroll in our services are full-time parents, full-time students, full-time workers, maybe with more than one job. Some of the hardest working people I've ever encountered in my life. And the idea that they've come here to be a drain on the system is just laughable. So I don't know how to get people to see that. But to me, there's no question. People come here to work really hard.
Right. Absolutely. Like, as an immigrant, again, I saw that, and I think it's partly because they don't understand the culture or like I came out of respect here, and then I think that's where I started my Cultural Nepal program, because they have no clue where I come from, my value system, what I'm doing. So, things like that. I think I'm very grateful to Acton TV for that matter, because I did not know about that until, I went through my ups and downs of life.
Yeah.
But, through that, I learned that there is a great opportunity here for somebody like me to educate people here, just like I need to get educated, sometimes.
But also look at how lucky we are that you're here, right? You're putting on this program, and you've been doing it since 2016, and people get to learn, about the Nepali community. They get to learn from your guests and from you, and from the different conversations you host, and that's a perfect example of let's say you hadn't been able to immigrate here, you hadn't been able to become a US citizen here, you wouldn't be here to do this.
Right.
So we're just all better off for it.
Yeah. And then that way I can also bring my good message of America, because people, in other country also, they see this huge giant country imposing on you. They
Right.
will see how hard you guys are working for us,
Mm.
and so that way I can also vouch for the America. And then, my interest is the health of America too, just like,
Mm.
health of my home country. So
Right.
it's a really, I feel very lucky to be here, and thank you for all the work that to make me feel like at home also. So now let's go to talking about this refugee and immigrants. I'm also, because of my background in Nepal, I'm interested to know your experience with Nepali speaking community. When I say Nepali speaking community, there are Nepali from Bhutan, Burma, there are
Yeah.
Tibetans who has struggled through their land,
Yeah.
came to Nepal to get their life, straightened. And so, like, what is your experience with Nepali community? How is IINE has involved?
Actually, maybe before I answer how IINE has been involved, I will speak to that, but I'd also just like to say personally, I used to live in Nepal. So
Oh,
I've worked for a few different organizations doing sort of community development and public health work, anti-human trafficking work. And so I have a lot of experience with Tibetan refugees, but also with Nepalis, with, other ethnic minority folks in the surrounding Kathmandu. And so that was a lot of my work before I started really engaging with US-based refugee work. And so that's actually how I got into this work, because I was doing programs overseas with Tibetan refugees and with sort of marginalized Nepali and North Indian communities. And I thought, I really want to continue this work for my whole life, but I also want to be close to my own family. I want to live in my own country eventually. And how am I going to do this? And that's how I found refugee services. So I love your country. I'll say that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so we can talk about that, a little bit about your experience in Nepal. But again, get back to that. I'm kind of, like warming up now. So,
Sure.
so I, when I came here, Nepal was in the brinks of big changes, which I didn't experience. So in my mind, that Nepal that I was is old Nepal, and then when I go back, I don't see that. And for me, it's a disappointment. But for you, I don't know when you left, but let's start with the Bhutanese refugees here.
Yeah. So Bhutanese refugees are not really arriving in the US anymore, but there was a pretty big wave of Bhutanese refugees who were arriving kind of early in my career of working with refugees in the United States. And so I used to work in Manchester, New Hampshire, where there's a big Bhutanese community. And then there's a smaller Bhutanese community in Lowell, Massachusetts, where we have another office. And for a period of time, we had Nepali speakers on staff as interpreters. I don't know if we ever had a Nepali speaking case worker. We may have at one point, but they were sort of one of the largest groups we were resettling for a period of time, Bhutanese refugees. I know that we've also had folks from Myanmar who did speak some Nepali because of the group that they were from. It might not have been their primary language, but we've worked with those folks too. And I don't know what more I can say about it. There was at one point there was sort of a community. A Bhutanese refugee community group that had been formed in Lowell that we would, reach out to and make sure we were communicating with all the time. In Manchester, New Hampshire, the Bhutanese community group has really kind of solidified and become very formal. They're their own nonprofit organization now who we, collaborate with on things. And so, Nepali speaking refugees have been a huge part of our work in the last decade and are a big part of the communities where we work.
Right, and not anymore. They're
still there, but they're just not arriving anymore. So I think I can't remember when the very last families came. It's probably been maybe within the last year we had a family, but I mean those camps in Kathmandu and surrounding have really they've ceased resettlement because it reached a point where you had to be registered with the United Nations as a refugee and kind of prepared to resettle, or it was being cut off. And so right at the end, some of the families that were coming were folks who hadn't necessarily planned to resettle, or maybe were experiencing a lot of challenges within Nepal and weren't sure they were going to resettle. But at this point, I think it's completely finished.
Right. What are the new challenges now that, a lot of things in immigration administration had changed or in the process of changing?
Yeah.
What are the challenges now?
Well, I think we're in an interesting moment because some of our challenges may be improving. The last 4 years have been so challenging for immigration policy. I mean, anybody who's trying to follow changes to US immigration policy is going to have a headache from just the incredible speed of the changes in these last 4 years. All of the different pathways to entering this country or remaining in this country legally have been systematically getting shut down, right? And so that's been, for a person like me who works in immigration but is not an immigration attorney, it's even been hard to follow for me because it's happening so fast. And I think for the general public who's not thinking about immigration all the time, it's been kind of impossible to follow. So changes, to the diversity visa, changes to asylum, changes to all the, pathways for students, just constant changes.
Right.
So those have been huge challenges. The good news is that it looks like the Biden administration wants to rebuild the immigration system and they want to reestablish the refugee program. That's great. I think it's a question of how quickly these things actually happen. I think another challenge for organizations like us is that during the time that refugee resettlement was pretty much dismantled, you lose institutional knowledge, right? You lose staff who know how to do the work. You kind of start to focus on other things. And so it's not just about refugees coming back. The whole refugee system has to build back up and be ready to do that work again. That's a challenge as well. And then I think it goes without saying that COVID-19 has been an enormous challenge. We had to shift all of our services, all of our programs and activities online. We had to learn how to deliver things in person in a safe way. And when you're doing human services and it's about the relationship between the person and the person giving services, the person receiving services, you lose that human aspect when you're not face to face. And that has been really challenging.
Yes. I think it brought back to me the question about, again, the cultural differences, even dealing with the COVID, because I remember my great grandmother focusing on this lifestyle that we're focusing now. I won't be able to go to kitchen, touch this thing, because it's they explained us in a different way, so that the kids would understand. But now, we rebelled against it, and now I can see the value of it now. And I was like, wish we had that culture here. We wouldn't have to be impacted on COVID as much as we are getting impact now. Things like that knowledge, like you said, that knowledge we had, learned from generations, we're losing it, not only in America, but also in Nepal. And that kind of gives me like, oh my God, So things like that. My question was, now going back to your experience in Nepal, with that, like that different knowledge, different cultural thing. Can you tell us more about how is your work in Nepal, what your experience there, and the refugees, Tibetan refugees, which is another big issues.
It's a whole other issue.
A whole other issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, my work in Nepal kind of came in 3 phases. And the first was it was very academic. The first time I went to Nepal, I was a student. I was an anthropology student. I was doing research with Tibetan refugees, and I spent a lot of time in Tibetan communities. I do speak Tibetan, or at least I spoke it much better then. And I spent a lot of time with people and in communities doing ethnographic research. And of course, at that time, I kind of saw Nepal through that lens, through people who were sort of struggling to live in Nepal in various ways, but also feeling grateful to the Nepali government for hosting them. So it's a complicated relationship. I then had a period of time where I worked for study abroad programs. So I brought groups of students to Nepal. And that was a whole other thing because my colleagues were Nepali. I got to know all these Nepali, guides and vendors. And I was more like it felt like doing business in Nepal. And that was great because suddenly I had all these friends and I felt like I actually understood how things worked a little better. finally I got into a job that was what I really wanted to be doing, which was working for an international NGO, which was called World Education Inc. They have a big office and they've been there for many years in Kathmandu. And I got to be engaged in formal and non-formal education programs all over the country. So a lot of my work was sort of remote, technical support and project management and finance, but I did get to travel to different projects in the field periodically, and it was just incredible. My colleagues were incredible, the work was incredible, and Nepal is the most fascinating place. just the number of languages and cultures and issues and trying to get your head around the politics. You could never fully, as an outsider, I think, never fully understand Nepal, but I was fascinated all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I tease my friends, and that's what I also feel, that I have a connection with America, is Nepal should be old America, old-fashioned America. It's crazy, diverse.
Yeah.
I thought that I came to America with the expectation that there is a freedom and, like humanity and equality, all that thing. And then now I'm confused here. And I felt that I had that back home. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, so it's kind of, that's how I felt. So knowing that, because when I came to America, there was very few Nepali people here.
Yeah.
Traditionally, I don't know if you felt that or not, but when I was growing up at my generation, up until my generation, I should say, people didn't want it to leave home. They just, like, it's not even encouraged, and especially the girls, never, and so I kind of rebelled against my family and society. So I was one of the very few who started the trend of coming to America. And when I came here, there was not very many Nepali people, and it's a long story. To make long story short, so now I know more about immigrations, and I have been an immigrant now. I mean, I was like, I never felt that way, but it's a reality of my life. I'm kind of wondering about because then diversity visa came into play that I was not aware of. So my question is, like, what's the difference between diversity visa and like this refugees? And those are the two big things that I know, that it's easy way of becoming a citizen. I don't know all other way. I think there are various paths to immigration and citizenship, but refugee and diversity visa, refugee is a sad side of it, whereas diversity is very welcoming and warm and very collaborative and respectful to me. So what are those two different, like, how do you feel the difference?
I will start by saying that I am not a legal expert, and I can't really speak about legally how those things are different very well. But I know that the diversity visa has been a really important pathway for people coming from lots of countries around the world, including Nepal. And, it's interesting because when I talk to people who have received a diversity visa, I feel like I almost always hear the same story, almost always. And I'm not sure why, but what I mostly hear is, I applied for this thing. I never thought I would get it. When I got it, I thought it must be a joke. There's no way I believed I was actually getting this thing. And then I have it now, and I came to the United States, and now my whole life is here. It's almost like this shocking thing that occurred in a person's life. I don't know if that resonates with you, but I hear that story again and again. Whereas, like you said, when a person comes as a refugee, because they don't have an option to live somewhere else, right? I mean, refugees are, the United Nations considers there to be various durable solutions for refugees. They say the first and best solution is they can repatriate. They can go back to their home country. That's what they would like to see.
Wish. I know that lot of sad stories of Bhutanese refugees, their suicidal, high rate of suicide, highest rate. I think deep down their heart is they want to go back to their own home.
Right.
I can resonate that as a Nepali people, because they're very attached with the family and their land, and they're very loyal and faithful to wherever they live.
Yes, and I think that's what I was kind of referring to earlier when I said there were people still in the camps that weren't sure they were resettling from Nepal. I think in my experience, I have met more Bhutanese refugees who were uncertain about coming to the United States than I have refugees from other communities. Right. I think that there was a strong desire to go back, and for some people that really, resettlement really didn't feel like a solution. Right. Whereas I think for some other refugee groups, repatriating, going back is just, it's not, it either doesn't feel like an option, so they're not even trying, or it just hasn't been the goal. It just feels impossible. And so in those cases, the United Nations would say, well, the next best option is local integration. So let's say, you know, the Nepali government says, oh, you can all have citizenship of Nepal. You can all live here forever. We know that doesn't happen very often in most countries, right? If there's an influx of refugees, that initial host country is not likely to give all of those people citizenship and host them long term, because oftentimes refugees are fleeing to countries that themselves are struggling. And so that's challenging. And so then resettlement comes as a sort of final option. And so for refugees who are resettling to the United States, they have just, it's not to say that people who receive the diversity visa haven't also been through so much, but I think it's pretty safe to say that refugees, by the time they resettle in the US, have been through lots of trials and tribulations, and they're, you know, this is kind of not the end of a journey, but it's another step in a really long journey.
Yes. So the refugee has more challenge, in other words, than the...
I mean, I don't think I can say that on a person by person level, because I'm sure lots of people have received diversity visas who've had all kinds of challenges. But I think if you're someone who, you know, sort of has the, you know, the skills and the capacity to navigate the system and apply for a diversity visa and receive one, you may have faced less struggles than a person who has found themselves in the refugee program. But I don't know, maybe that's not true. That's kind of just my...
I think it's like you said, it's person to person, it's very individual too. But definitely what I can say is refugee or not refugee, as a Nepali origin, you know, that I can say that there's a huge difference on system,
yeah,
you know, like between Nepali culture, and I think the cultural background and understanding and the way of lifestyle is so different that anybody from Nepal is really difficult to adjust, you know. And so luckily, luckily, I think we, you know, when we bump into people like you know, and the organization who are there for, you know, bigger humanity oriented organization, then you probably get help. But sometimes there are a lot of challenges. But I really admire your work though, and understanding. By living there, I think it makes a huge difference of understanding. And so, yeah.
I think so too. And I mean, I lived in India for 3 years. I spent about 2 years in Nepal, but not consistently. It was kind of back and forth. And then I lived for another year on the Thai-Myanmar border, working with refugees in Myanmar. So for me, the experiences of having lived and worked in Asia, obviously I was a very privileged person. I had visas to be there. I had jobs. I had resources, but there were still so many times when I just didn't know how to, you know, buy the food I needed, or put gas in my motorcycle, or, you know, pay my rent, or do whatever it is I had to do. And you're just struggling every day to figure out how to do those things. And so I do think that helped me to lead me to the work I do now, because I know that it's challenging.
Yeah.
I know that it's challenging.
Yeah, it's very, very challenging. And, you know, even for me, I'm one of the luckiest that I didn't have to go through all this hassle, but still it has been very challenging. And I'm like, if something like this happened to me, and if I do this way, I feel this way, what about the others, you know?
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely is very eye-opening.
It's very, and you try to imagine, you know, when people ask me, well, what do refugee or immigrant services look like? What does that really mean? What I usually say to them is, imagine that tomorrow you had to move to another country where you don't speak the language, or you maybe speak only small parts of the language, and you had to start over with everything. And within a few months, you had to be working and paying your own bills. What are all the things you would need to make that happen? And then people are like, oh my gosh, and they start to list the things they would need. And it's like, yes, we do that. We do that. We do that. Yeah. So it's just, you know, it's starting over your life in a whole new place, and all of the supports that go into it. Not that we make it possible. People make it possible for themselves, right? But we just provide the sort of extra lift.
Yeah, I think it makes a whole difference when you have the support and when you don't. And it's not just the language. Legal issue is a huge issue, even for me. Economic is huge issue, because I did not grow up focusing on, like, I understand now, and I understand why it's important, but still my focus has never been to make money or do business or economics, you know.
Right.
And that has created a lot of challenges for me because I do a lot of hard work, but I don't really get the reward or the value. Even in Nepal, I don't know if you felt that way, because we grew up thinking that the guests are like a god and they are first in our life. I remember my parents, they were not feeding me good food, but when the guests come, they get the best one, you know. And so when we come here, then it's a different, you know. We get worst, you know.
Oh yeah, the United States
I get the worst all the time, you know, back home and everywhere. And it's like,
does not understand hospitality. I feel like everywhere else I've gone in the world, what hospitality means or being welcoming is a whole other level than what people think it means here.
But I don't know if you feel the same way, but at least I know that my value at home was taught that way. Treat guest as a god, you know. And but you know, like, it's just, what I'm saying is, it's not wrong or right, it's just a different system, you know. And that's how and it's good to take care of yourself first as well, if you can take care of yourself. And then that's the mess in Nepal right now I see, is with the Bhutanese refugees, Tibetan refugees, India, everywhere, like all around the neighboring country, flocking in Nepal, with the open border. And what I'm trying to also have a sympathy for people here, non-immigrant, is if it's like open like Nepal, well, it's how, you know, like, there's a fine balance we need to work, you know. And so I am hoping that with the knowledge of immigrant and non-immigrant together, if we can collaborate to solve this issue, to save American spirit, because it's a great country, you know, it's a respectful, and we want to keep that spirit here for its own good as well as the world's good, right? So I am just hoping that our discussions here together and our work, maybe hopefully, you know, together, will bring some, you know, easy, you know, path to this great work you're doing. So
thank you.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping that I have a lot of other questions because it's a really huge issue. I have a question about the pathway to immigration, pathway to citizenship, and all that.
You know, if anyone who is interested in learning more about the International Institute of New England, I encourage them to visit our website, which is iine.org. And all of our services are there. You can contact an attorney directly there. So I hope if anyone watching is interested, that you'll be in touch with us as well.
Yes, and then I highly recommend, especially again, Kate Bertino, is that how you say it?
Bertino, yeah.
And then Bethany Gamble, who was such a great delight in my life, working with me. And I love you guys, the work that you do for humanitarian and, you know, freedom and all that good things in the world. And if there's anything the Culture Nepal, you know, people can do, reach out to Nepali people or something. We're here also. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. And then it's so nice to hear that you had a great experience in Nepal. And
I did.
Yeah, so thank you for your time, and we'll continue our conversation next time.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and stay safe, and this COVID thing, you know, out of this, and now we can travel, hopefully. You know?
Hopefully. I can't wait.
Yeah, and so we have another new challenge, but with the new administrations, with Kamala Harris is such oh my God, inspiration, you know, that brought up a whole lot of hope for all of us. And so hopefully things will go well. All the best to you.
Thank you. Yeah, here's hoping. Thank you for having me.